June 12, 1560. A 26-year-old warlord with 10,000 men faces an army 6 times his size. The invaders are marching toward his capital. His advisors beg him to surrender. His allies abandon him. His own family questions his sanity. He ignores them all, walks out of his castle, and does something that will echo through 5 centuries of military history. He attacks. This is the story of how Oda Nobunaga turned a rainstorm into a weapon, desperation into strategy, and certain death into Japan's most stunning military victory. No fluff. No filler. Just the decisions, the blood, and the moment that changed a nation forever. If this is your first time here, hit that like button. If you value history told without the sugarcoating, you're in the right place. Now let's go back to 1560, to a Japan tearing itself apart. The year is 1560. Japan doesn't exist. Not as a nation. Not as a unified concept. What exists is a 1,000-mile-long battlefield where regional warlords, daimyo, slaughter each other for land, rice, and power. The emperor sits powerless in Kyoto. The shogun is a puppet. Real authority belongs to whoever can hold it with a sword. This period has a name, Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states. And in 1560, the most dangerous man in Japan isn't the emperor or the shogun. It's a warlord named Imagawa Yoshimoto. Imagawa Yoshimoto controls the Takedo, the eastern coastal highway connecting Japan's heartland to its richest provinces. He commands the loyalty of samurai clans across 3 provinces, Suruga, Tatami, and Mikawa. His army is the largest private military force in Japan. His ambition is simple: march to Kyoto, take control of the shogun, and become the de facto ruler of Japan. It's not a new plan. Other warlords have tried it. But Yoshimoto has something they didn't: 25,000 battle-hardened samurai, another 35,000 ashigaru foot soldiers, and the wealth of the richest region in eastern Japan. Standing between Yoshimoto and Kyoto is a young warlord named Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga controls Owari Province, a small agricultural region northwest of Imagawa territory. He has 10,000 men. That's it. No powerful allies. No strategic depth. No defensive terrain. His province is flat, open, and indefensible. Militarily, Nobunaga is a speed bump. Everyone knows it. Including Nobunaga. But here's the thing about Nobunaga. He's not like other daimyo. He doesn't follow tradition. He doesn't respect hierarchy. He doesn't care what samurai honor dictates. When he was 16, he showed up to his father's funeral dressed like a peasant and threw ceremonial incense at the altar. His own family called him the Fool of Owari. His retainers whispered that he was unfit to lead. And when his father died and left him in charge, half his vassals rebelled. Nobunaga crushed them. Not through negotiation or compromise. Through violence. Quick, brutal, and absolute. By 1560, Nobunaga has consolidated control over Owari Province. Barely. His position is fragile. He's surrounded by enemies. To the north, the Saito clan. To the south, the Imagawa. To the east, smaller clans waiting to see which way the wind blows. His only advantage is that he's underestimated. Everyone thinks he's reckless. Unstable. Doomed. They're about to learn that reckless and doomed are not the same thing. May 1560. Imagawa Yoshimoto begins mobilizing his army. The target, Kyoto. The route, straight through Owari Province. Yoshimoto doesn't plan to conquer Owari. He plans to ignore it. Nobunaga's 10,000 men aren't a threat. They're a distraction. Yoshimoto's strategy is simple. March his 60,000 soldiers along the Takedo, smash through any resistance, and reach Kyoto before the summer rains. Once he controls the shogun, every warlord in Japan will bend the knee or face annihilation. It's a sound plan. It's a logical plan. It's the kind of plan that works when you have 6 times your enemy's strength. Yoshimoto's army begins moving in early June. 60,000 men don't march quietly. The columns stretch for miles. Scouts report their movements to Nobunaga within hours. The news spreads through Owari like wildfire. Panic sets in. Nobunaga's retainers convene an emergency council. The consensus is unanimous. Surrender. Negotiate. Ally with Yoshimoto. Anything but fight. Because fighting is suicide. Nobunaga listens to their arguments. He says nothing. When they finish, he stands up and walks out. His retainers follow him, confused. Nobunaga doesn't go to the war room. He doesn't summon his generals. He goes to the temple. He kneels before a statue of the war god Bishamonten and performs a sacred dance, the Atsumori. It's a warrior's prayer, a ritual before battle. When he finishes, he stands, turns to his retainers, and says 6 words, "A man's life lasts 50 years. It's a line from the dance. It means, life is short. Death is certain. Fear is pointless. Then Nobunaga walks back to his castle, eats a simple meal of rice and miso soup, and issues orders. Mobilize every soldier. Prepare for battle. No retreat. No negotiation. Attack. His retainers think he's lost his mind. Some consider abandoning him. But they don't. Because for all his recklessness, Nobunaga has never lost a battle. And because in the Sengoku Jidai, loyalty to a living lord, no matter how insane, is safer than disloyalty. So they obey. June 10, 1560. Imagawa Yoshimoto's vanguard reaches the border of Owari province. They encounter Nobunaga's forward defenses, 2 small forts manned by skeleton garrisons. The Imagawa forces attack. The forts fall within hours. The defenders are slaughtered. Yoshimoto's generals send word back, Nobunaga isn't defending. He's abandoning his positions. The road to Owari's capital, Kiyosu Castle, is wide open. Yoshimoto receives the news and smiles. This is going exactly as expected. Nobunaga is running. By tonight, Owari will be behind them. By next week, they'll be in Kyoto. Yoshimoto orders his army to continue the march. No detours. No delays. Maximum speed. But Nobunaga isn't running. He's watching. From Kiyosu Castle, he's receiving reports every hour. Yoshimoto's army is moving fast. Too fast. They're not setting up defensive camps. They're not securing supply lines. They're treating this like a parade, not a campaign. And that's exactly what Nobunaga is counting on. June 11th. Yoshimoto's main force reaches the village of Okehazama, a small settlement in a narrow valley surrounded by wooded hills. It's late afternoon. The army has been marching for days. Yoshimoto orders a halt. His men need rest. Food. Water. The valley of Okehazama is perfect, sheltered, close to fresh water, defensible. Yoshimoto's command staff sets up his headquarters in a clearing. His bodyguard, elite samurai, form a perimeter. The bulk of his army spreads out across the valley, setting up temporary camps. Fires are lit. Rice is cooked. Sake is poured. Yoshimoto is celebrating. Not victory yet, but inevitability. His scouts report that Nobunaga's forces are nowhere near. Kiyosu Castle is still occupied, which means Nobunaga is hiding behind walls, hoping Yoshimoto will just march past and leave him alone. Yoshimoto finds this pathetic. A real warrior would fight. But Nobunaga isn't a real warrior. He's a coward. And cowards don't matter. Yoshimoto opens a bottle of sake. His generals toast to their success. The mood is relaxed. Confident. Victorious. They don't know that 15 miles away, Nobunaga is already moving. June 12th. Dawn. Nobunaga walks out of Kiyosu Castle with less than 3,000 men. Not his entire army. Just his personal retainers and the most loyal samurai clans. He leaves the rest to defend the castle and create the illusion that he's still there. He tells no one where he's going. He doesn't issue written orders. He just moves. His men march southeast, away from the main road, through farmers' fields and forest paths. They move fast and silent. No banners. No war drums. No noise. Nobunaga is gambling everything on one assumption: Yoshimoto thinks he's already won. And men who think they've won stop paying attention. By mid-morning, Nobunaga's scouts bring him the information he needs. Yoshimoto's army is camped in the Okehazama Valley. The main force is dispersed. Yoshimoto himself is in the center, surrounded by his command staff and elite bodyguards. The army is resting, eating, drinking. They're not expecting an attack. They're not even looking for one. Nobunaga stops his column in a forested area overlooking the valley. He climbs a hill and observes the enemy camp. His officers gather around him, waiting for orders. One of them, a veteran samurai named Sakuma Nobumori, finally asks the obvious question: "My lord, what are we doing? We have 3,000 men. They have 60,000. If we attack, we die." Nobunaga doesn't take his eyes off the valley. He says, "We die if we do nothing. We die if we run. We die if we negotiate. So we die fighting." Sakuma tries again. "Even if we reach Yoshimoto, his bodyguard will cut us down before we get close." Nobunaga turns to him. "Then we don't give them time to react." Another officer speaks up. "We need at least 10,000 men to assault a camp that size. We have 3,000. Nobunaga nods. "Which is why we're not assaulting the camp. We're killing Yoshimoto. Once he's dead, the army collapses." It's a decapitation strike. The kind of tactic that only works if everything goes perfectly. If the timing is exact. If the enemy is distracted. If luck is on your side. Nobunaga is betting his life, his clan, and his province on a single gamble: that Yoshimoto is so confident, he's left himself exposed. But Nobunaga has one more advantage: the weather. All morning, dark clouds have been gathering. The air is heavy, thick with moisture. A storm is coming. And storms in June are violent. Nobunaga looks at the sky and smiles. "We wait for the rain." His officers don't understand. Rain makes movement harder. Visibility drops. Footing becomes treacherous. How does that help a smaller force attacking uphill into a fortified camp? Nobunaga doesn't explain. He just orders his men to rest, eat, and prepare. When the rain comes, they move. Early afternoon. The first drops fall. Within minutes, it's a downpour. The kind of rain that turns dirt roads into rivers and forest trails into mud slides. In the Okehazama Valley, Yoshimoto's army scrambles for cover. Soldiers huddle under makeshift shelters. Fires are extinguished. Visibility drops to a few dozen feet. The celebration stops. The camp becomes a cold, miserable mess. Yoshimoto himself retreats into a covered palanquin, surrounded by his bodyguards. He's annoyed but not worried. Rain delays the march, nothing more. Once it stops, they'll continue toward Kyoto. He orders his men to wait it out. No one is going anywhere in this weather. He's right. No one is going anywhere. Except Nobunaga. Nobunaga gives the signal. His 3,000 samurai rise from their positions in the forest and begin moving down the hillside. The rain is so heavy that they're invisible from more than 50 feet away. The sound of their movement is drowned out by thunder and the roar of rain hitting leaves and mud. They reach the edge of the valley undetected. Nobunaga's plan is simple. His force will split into 3 groups. The first group will create a diversion by attacking the eastern edge of the camp, drawing attention and troops away from the center. The second group will circle around to the west and wait. The third group, led by Nobunaga himself, will punch straight through the center toward Yoshimoto's position. Once Yoshimoto is dead, they retreat before the rest of the army can react. It's insane. It's desperate. It's exactly the kind of plan that only works once. And Nobunaga is betting everything on it working now. The first group attacks. They crash into the eastern edge of the camp, screaming war cries, cutting down soldiers who are too confused and disorganized to mount a defense. The Imagawa troops think it's a raid, a harassment attack by a small Oda detachment. They don't realize it's the main assault. They grab their weapons and start moving toward the noise, toward the eastern perimeter. Exactly as Nobunaga planned. With the eastern flank now thinned out, Nobunaga leads his main force straight into the center of the camp. His samurai move fast, in tight formation, cutting through scattered resistance. The rain is so intense that most of Yoshimoto's soldiers don't see them until it's too late. Those who do see them can't organize a defense. Communication is impossible. Visibility is zero. Orders can't be heard over the storm. Nobunaga's men are a blade cutting through chaos. Yoshimoto's bodyguards realize something is wrong when they start hearing fighting from multiple directions. But they don't understand the scale yet. They assume it's a skirmish, a nuisance. Then Nobunaga's samurai appear out of the rain, 50 feet away, charging directly at the palanquin. Yoshimoto's elite guards react instantly. These are veteran samurai, the best warriors in the Imagawa army. They form a defensive ring around Yoshimoto's palanquin, katanas drawn, ready to die protecting their lord. And die they do. Nobunaga's men hit them like a hammer. The fighting is brutal, close quarters, sword against sword. Men slip in the mud, stumble over corpses, fight blind in the rain. But Nobunaga's force has momentum. They're moving forward. The bodyguards are holding ground. And in a fight between motion and stasis, motion wins. The bodyguard line breaks. Nobunaga's samurai push through. Yoshimoto is still inside his palanquin, scrambling for his armor. He realizes too late what's happening. This isn't a raid. This is an assassination. He tries to get out, to reach his sword, to organize a defense. He doesn't get the chance. A samurai named Mori Shinsuke, one of Nobunaga's most trusted retainers, reaches the palanquin first. He tears open the fabric, sees Yoshimoto struggling with his helmet, and strikes. Yoshimoto raises his arm to block. Mori's blade cuts through his wrist. Blood sprays across the palanquin's interior. Yoshimoto screams, stumbles backward, tries to draw his sword with his remaining hand. Another Oda samurai, Hattori Kohita, lunges forward and drives his spear through Yoshimoto's chest. The warlord collapses, blood pouring from his mouth. Mori raises his sword and brings it down on Yoshimoto's neck. One strike. Clean. Final. Imagawa Yoshimoto is dead. The most powerful warlord in eastern Japan is dead. Killed by samurai from a clan he considered beneath him, in a camp he thought was safe, on a march he believed was unstoppable. Mori grabs Yoshimoto's head, holds it aloft, and screams loud enough to be heard over the storm, "Imagawa Yoshimoto is dead." The effect is immediate. Yoshimoto's remaining bodyguards freeze. The Oda samurai scream the same words, over and over, "Yoshimoto is dead. Yoshimoto is dead." The message spreads through the camp like fire. Panic replaces confusion. Soldiers who were preparing to counterattack suddenly realize their commander is gone. Their chain of command is shattered. Their purpose for being here has been severed with one sword stroke. Nobunaga doesn't wait for the chaos to settle. He orders the retreat. His men pull back, fast and organized, disappearing into the rain and forest before the bulk of the Imagawa army even understands what happened. By the time Yoshimoto's generals reach the center of the camp and see their lord's headless corpse, Nobunaga is already gone. The immediate aftermath is chaos. 60,000 soldiers suddenly have no commander. No orders. No clear chain of succession. Yoshimoto's generals try to organize a pursuit, but they don't know where the enemy went. They don't know how many attacked. Some think it was a full-scale assault by Nobunaga's entire army. Others think it was a surgical strike by a few hundred men. No one knows the truth. And in the absence of truth, fear fills the void. By evening, the rain stops. The Imagawa army begins to fracture. Some units pull back toward Imagawa territory. Others stay in place, waiting for orders that never come. A few attempt to continue the march toward Kyoto, but without Yoshimoto's authority, they have no legitimacy. The alliance of clans that made up Yoshimoto's army starts to dissolve. Clan leaders look at each other and ask the same question: why are we here? The answer used to be, because Yoshimoto commands it. That answer is now lying in a palanquin with no head. Within 3 days, the Imagawa army has completely disintegrated. Tens of thousands of soldiers return to their home provinces. The invasion is over. The march to Kyoto is abandoned. The most powerful military force in eastern Japan ceases to exist because one man died in the rain. Back in Kyosu Castle, Nobunaga returns with Yoshimoto's head. His men are exhausted, bloodied, stunned by what they've accomplished. Nobunaga places the head on a table and stares at it for a long moment. His retainers wait for him to speak. He finally says, "Luck favors the bold. But boldness makes its own luck." It's a statement that will define his entire career. Because what Nobunaga did at Okehazama wasn't just bold. It was calculated. He didn't charge blindly into a superior force hoping for the best. He studied the terrain, the weather, the enemy's mindset. He exploited overconfidence, used the storm as a weapon, and struck where the enemy was weakest. Yes, he was outnumbered 6-1. Yes, he risked everything. But it wasn't luck that won the battle. It was preparation meeting opportunity. The consequences of Okehazama ripple across Japan. Word spreads fast. The fool of Owari isn't a fool. He's a killer. Other daimyo start paying attention. Some seek alliances. Others prepare defenses. No one underestimates Oda Nobunaga again. For the Imagawa clan, Okehazama is a death sentence. Without Yoshimoto, the clan fragments. His son, Imagawa Ujizane, tries to hold the alliance together, but he lacks his father's charisma and military skill. Within a decade, the Imagawa territories are carved up by neighboring warlords. The clan that once seemed destined to rule Japan fades into irrelevance. For Nobunaga, Okehazama is the beginning. It's the moment his reputation transforms from reckless fool to dangerous genius. He uses the momentum to expand his influence. He forms an alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, a young daimyo from Mikawa province who had been forced to serve Yoshimoto. Together, they begin consolidating power across central Japan. But let's be clear about what happened at Okehazama. This wasn't a traditional battle. There were no formations clashing across open fields. No prolonged sieges. No cavalry charges. This was a commando raid. A special forces operation executed in medieval Japan. Nobunaga didn't defeat 60,000 men. He killed one man and let fear do the rest. The tactical genius of Okehazama lies in Nobunaga's understanding of psychology. He knew that large armies are only as strong as their command structure. Kill the head and the body dies. He also understood that surprise and speed could neutralize numerical superiority. The Imagawa army never had the chance to bring its full strength to bear because by the time they realized what was happening, it was already over. Modern military strategists still study Okehazama as a textbook example of asymmetric warfare. How a smaller, faster force can defeat a larger, slower one by targeting leadership and exploiting environmental conditions. The rain wasn't just lucky. Nobunaga waited for it because he understood that bad weather degrades the advantages of a larger army: visibility, communication, coordination. In the rain, 60,000 men are just 60,000 individuals trying not to drown. And individuals can't stop a coordinated strike force. There's also the question of intelligence. Nobunaga knew exactly where Yoshimoto was camped. He knew the layout of the valley. He knew the composition of the bodyguard. That level of detail doesn't come from luck. It comes from reconnaissance, from scouts moving ahead, from spies embedded in the enemy camp, or local informants who knew the terrain. Nobunaga's intelligence network was already sophisticated in 1560, a skill he would refine and expand throughout his career. And then there's the sheer audacity of walking out of your castle with 3,000 men to attack an army of 60,000. Most commanders would have fortified, called for reinforcements, or sued for peace. Nobunaga did the opposite. He attacked. Why? Because he understood that his position was already hopeless. If Yoshimoto marched past Owari and took Kyoto, Nobunaga would be irrelevant. If Yoshimoto decided to conquer Owari first, Nobunaga would be dead. His only chance was to act while Yoshimoto was vulnerable. And vulnerability, in Yoshimoto's case, was arrogance. Yoshimoto believed he was unstoppable. He celebrated before victory was secured. He camped in a vulnerable position because he didn't believe anyone would dare attack him. That overconfidence killed him. And the lesson is universal. The moment you believe you cannot lose is the moment you're most likely to. Let's talk about the human cost. Nobunaga's strike force suffered casualties. Exact numbers are disputed, but estimates suggest several hundred dead or wounded. Yoshimoto's bodyguard was nearly wiped out. Hundreds more Imagawa soldiers died in the initial panic and retreat. But the real death toll came later, in the chaos that followed. Soldiers fleeing through unfamiliar territory, drowning in rivers swollen by rain, attacked by bandits, starving in the countryside. The collapse of the Imagawa army left thousands of men stranded far from home. Many never made it back. For Nobunaga's men, Okehazama became a defining moment. The samurai who fought in that battle carried the reputation for the rest of their lives. They were the men who followed Nobunaga into the storm and came back alive. That kind of loyalty, forged in shared impossibility, is unbreakable. Nobunaga would rely on these men for the next 2 decades as he fought to unify Japan. And unify Japan he did. Over the next 20 years, Nobunaga conquered clan after clan, province after province. He introduced firearms on a mass scale, revolutionized castle design, broke the power of Buddhist warrior monks, and came closer than anyone in a century to ending the Sengoku Jidai. He was ruthless, innovative, brutal, and effective. And none of it would have been possible without Okehazama. But here's the bitter irony of Nobunaga's story. The man who built his reputation on surprise and speed was killed by the same tactics he perfected. June 21, 1582, 22 years after Okehazama, Nobunaga is staying at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. He's at the height of his power. Most of Japan is under his control. Unification seems within reach. Then one of his generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, surrounds the temple with 13,000 men and attacks at dawn. Nobunaga wakes to the sound of gunfire and realizes immediately what's happening. He's been betrayed. His bodyguard is outnumbered. There's no escape. He fights for a few minutes, then retreats into an inner chamber, sets the room on fire, and commits seppuku. His body is never recovered. The man who killed Imagawa Yoshimoto with a surprise strike dies the exact same way. History has few ironies sharper than that. Nobunaga's death doesn't undo his accomplishments. His top general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, avenges him within days, hunting down Akechi Mitsuhide and killing him. Hideyoshi then completes Nobunaga's work, unifying Japan under a single government for the first time in centuries. After Hideyoshi's death, Tokugawa Ieyasu, Nobunaga's old ally from Okehazama, takes control and establishes the Tokugawa shogunate, which rules Japan for the next 250 years. So the legacy of Okehazama isn't just one battle. It's the foundation of modern Japan. Because without Okehazama, Nobunaga would have been crushed or marginalized. Without Nobunaga, there's no Hideyoshi. Without Hideyoshi, there's no Ieyasu. Without Ieyasu, the Sengoku Jidai drags on for decades longer, maybe centuries. One battle, one storm, one desperate gamble changed the trajectory of an entire nation. But let's zoom out even further. What does Okehazama teach us about warfare, about leadership, about risk? First, numerical superiority is not the same as invincibility. Large armies are slow, difficult to command, and vulnerable to decapitation strikes. Size creates its own weaknesses: logistics, communication, morale. A smaller force that moves faster and strikes smarter can exploit those weaknesses. Second, the battle is often won before the fighting starts. Nobunaga's victory didn't happen in the Valley of Okehazama. It happened when he decided to attack while everyone else was preparing to surrender. It happened when he scouted Yoshimoto's camp and identified the exact location of the target. It happened when he waited for the rain instead of charging blindly. Preparation, intelligence, timing, these are the real weapons. Third, psychology matters more than steel. Yoshimoto's army didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they believed they'd already won. Nobunaga's men didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they were willing to risk everything. Confidence and fear are force multipliers. Control them and you control the battlefield. Fourth, unconventional tactics work once. Nobunaga never tried the Okehazama strategy again. He didn't need to. After 1560, his reputation alone became a weapon. Enemies knew that fighting him meant facing someone willing to do the unexpected. That fear gave him leverage in negotiations, made potential opponents think twice before attacking, and attracted ambitious samurai to his banner. One impossible victory created a lifetime of strategic advantage. And fifth, fortune favors the bold, but only if you prepare for it. Nobunaga took a massive risk at Okehazama. But it wasn't blind recklessness. He knew the terrain. He knew the weather. He knew Yoshimoto's location. He knew his own men could move fast and strike hard. The gamble was calculated. The boldness was strategic. And that's why it worked. Let's address the myths. Over the centuries, the story of Okehazama has been embellished, romanticized, and exaggerated. Some accounts claim Nobunaga had only 2,000 men, making the odds even more dramatic. Others say the storm was so intense that it was clearly divine intervention. Some versions depict Nobunaga performing elaborate rituals and receiving prophetic dreams before the battle. Here's what we know for certain, based on historical records and contemporary accounts. Nobunaga attacked a vastly superior force during a rainstorm. He killed Imagawa Yoshimoto in a surprise strike. The Imagawa army collapsed and retreated. Everything else, the exact troop numbers, the precise sequence of events, the specific weather conditions, is debated by historians. But the core facts are indisputable. A 26-year-old warlord with limited resources defeated the most powerful army in eastern Japan through speed, surprise, and psychological warfare. The battle itself lasted less than 2 hours from the first attack to Yoshimoto's death. 2 hours to decide the future of Japan. That's the nature of asymmetric warfare. Traditional battles can last days, weeks, even months. But decapitation strikes are binary. They succeed instantly, or they fail instantly. There's no middle ground. Nobunaga bet everything on 2 hours. And he won. What about the men who fought that day? History remembers Nobunaga. It remembers Yoshimoto. But what about the samurai who charged through the rain, who cut through the bodyguards, who held the line while their commander killed the enemy general? Most of their names are lost. A few are recorded: Mori Shinsuke, who struck the first blow against Yoshimoto; Hattori Kohita, who delivered the killing strike; Sakuma Nobumori, who led the diversionary attack. These men became legends in their own right, celebrated in their clans, rewarded with land and titles. But thousands of others fought and died without recognition. Ashigaru foot soldiers who held the eastern perimeter during the diversion. Samurai who covered the retreat while Nobunaga's strike force withdrew. Messengers who carried orders through the storm. Scouts who located Yoshimoto's camp and reported back under threat of death. War is fought by individuals, but history remembers the commanders. That's the way it's always been. For the people of Owari Province, Okehazama was deliverance. They were hours away from being conquered, their land divided among Yoshimoto's vassals, their livelihoods destroyed. Nobunaga saved them. Not because he was noble or altruistic, but because his survival depended on their survival. That's the transactional nature of feudal loyalty. The lord protects the land. The land feeds the army. The army protects the lord. Break that cycle, and the entire system collapses. And for Japan as a whole, Okehazama was a turning point. It announced that the old rules no longer applied. That tradition, hierarchy, and numerical strength weren't enough anymore. That a young, innovative, ruthless warlord could challenge the established order and win. Within a generation, Nobunaga's influence would reshape Japanese warfare, introducing mass firearm tactics, building modern castles, centralizing power, and breaking the political influence of religious institutions. The path to modern Japan started in a rainy valley in 1560. Let's talk about the storm itself. Rain as a tactical asset isn't new. Throughout history, commanders have used weather to their advantage. Fog at the Battle of Barnet, snow at the Battle of Trenton, rain at Waterloo. But Nobunaga's use of the storm was different. He didn't stumble into favorable weather. He waited for it. He understood that in a downpour, communication collapses. Orders can't be shouted across camp. Messengers can't run through mud. Signal flags are invisible. Drums and horns are drowned out by thunder. A massive army becomes a collection of isolated units, each blind to what's happening around them. For a smaller force, rain is an equalizer. Nobunaga's 3,000 men moved as a single unit because they were trained to follow him without orders. Yoshimoto's 60,000 needed constant communication to coordinate. Strip away that communication, and numbers become meaningless. In the rain, Nobunaga didn't face an army. He faced clusters of confused soldiers who couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't coordinate a response. There's also the psychological element. Rain is miserable. It's cold, wet, exhausting. Soldiers huddling under inadequate shelter, watching their fires go out, eating cold food, soaked to the bone, they're not thinking about defense. They're thinking about staying dry. That split second of hesitation when an attack comes, that fraction of a moment where they have to process what's happening instead of reacting instantly, is the difference between life and death. Nobunaga's men were wet and miserable too, but they had purpose. Momentum. They were attacking, not defending. And in war, momentum is armor. Now let's address the counterfactual. What if Nobunaga had failed? What if the bodyguards had held? What if the rain had stopped too early, giving the Imagawa army time to organize a counterattack? Nobunaga would have died in that valley. His clan would have been annihilated. Owari would have fallen. Yoshimoto would have continued to Kyoto, likely taking control of the shogunate. The Imagawa would have become the dominant power in central Japan. The Sengoku Jidai would have ended differently, possibly with Imagawa rule instead of Oda Toyotomi Tokugawa rule. Japanese history would have followed an entirely different path. But that's not what happened. Nobunaga didn't fail. And the reason he didn't fail is because he understood something fundamental about war. The willingness to risk everything is itself a weapon. Yoshimoto couldn't imagine someone attacking him with 3,000 men because it was insane. It was suicide. No rational commander would do it. And that's exactly why it worked. Nobunaga wasn't rational. He was desperate. And desperation, when combined with skill and preparation, is more dangerous than caution. The Battle of Okehazama is often compared to other famous underdog victories, Thermopylae, Agincourt, the Battle of Cannae. But those comparisons miss a critical difference. At Thermopylae, the Spartans used terrain to negate numerical superiority. At Agincourt, the English used longbows and mud to slaughter French knights. At Cannae, Hannibal used tactical genius to encircle a larger Roman army. Those were conventional battles fought with unconventional tactics. Okehazama wasn't a battle. It was an assassination disguised as a battle. Nobunaga didn't try to defeat the Imagawa army. He tried to kill Imagawa Yoshimoto. And once he succeeded, the army defeated itself. That's a different kind of warfare. It's closer to modern special operations, small units with specific objectives, relying on speed, surprise, and precision rather than mass and attrition. In that sense, Nobunaga was centuries ahead of his time. He understood that wars aren't always won by destroying enemy forces. Sometimes they're won by destroying enemy will. Kill the leader, shatter morale, and the fight ends without prolonged bloodshed. It's a brutal calculus, but it's effective. And in the Sengoku Jidai, effectiveness mattered more than honor. What happened to the survivors of Yoshimoto's army? Most went home. They returned to their provinces, to their clans, to their lives. Some joined other warlords. A few even ended up serving Nobunaga. Samurai loyalty in the Sengoku Jidai was pragmatic, not ideological. If your lord was dead and another warlord offered you land and a stipend, you took it. That was survival. But there were casualties beyond the battlefield. The Imagawa clan's collapse triggered a power vacuum. Neighboring warlords invaded Imagawa territory, carving up the provinces of Suruga and Tatami. Villages were burned. Farms were seized. Families were displaced. The human cost of Okehazama wasn't just the soldiers who died in the rain. It was the decades of instability that followed. And yet, that instability eventually led to unification. Because the collapse of the Imagawa removed one of the major obstacles to centralized power. If Yoshimoto had survived, Japan might have remained fragmented longer. His death accelerated the consolidation process. Nobunaga filled the void, and his successors finished what he started. So was Okehazama a good thing? That depends on your perspective. If you're a Japanese nationalist who values unification and stability, yes, it was a necessary step toward modernity. If you're a pacifist who sees war as inherently evil, no, it was just another example of violent men killing for power. If you're a historian, it's neither good nor bad. It's just what happened. And what happened shaped the next 500 years of Japanese history. Let's end where we began. June 12, 1560. A 26-year-old warlord stands in the rain, surrounded by 3,000 men, staring at an army 6 times his size. He knows the odds. He knows the risks. He knows that if he fails, he dies. And he attacks anyway. That decision, that single moment of defiance in the face of impossible odds, defines everything that follows. Nobunaga doesn't become the man who unified Japan because he was lucky. He becomes that man because he was willing to bet everything when everyone else was preparing to surrender. Because he understood that sometimes the only way to win is to risk losing everything. The Battle of Okehazama lasted 2 hours. But its consequences echoed for centuries. 1 man died in the rain. And a nation was reborn. If this story taught you something, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your thoughts on Nobunaga's gamble. Subscribe if you want more history told without the fluff. And share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the craziest move is the only move that works. Because history isn't made by people who play it safe. It's made by people who walk into storms.